Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, pushback channel, and I'll try that again actually. Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about real estate prices. Now, I've seen sort of a number of stories, well, recently. I saw another one earlier today that suggested that real estate was in real trouble across the Western world, that the glory days were over, and so on and so forth. I don't know about that, but you know, there are various categories of residential real estate, and some of them are still doing very well. Now, the cashed up international buyers, of which there are vast numbers swarming all over the West, and particularly Sydney, buying up swathes of real estate. All the Communist Party generals and rich Brahmin goons from India and elsewhere, and the international financial houses, the Black Rocks and all that sort of stuff. They're still buying up vast numbers of quality real estate. And, just as an example, some friends of ours bought a house for 3.5 million a few years ago, and that's already 5.2 million. So it's gone up by 50% in just a space of a few years. So now it is prime real estate. It's in a nice area and close to the water and water jetties, and it's very tree-lined streets. There's it's 98% white and that sort of thing. But it's a nice area. It's just very safe, and women go out on their own jogging at night because it's just an area, a nice area, safe area, and so on. So, but anyway, the values there are doing well. Now, we were over visiting a little while ago, and there were two houses for sale, or were going for auction, just down the road. So I often do this. I go out and have a look at the auction just to see what's happening. And so I went out there, and now clearance rates in auctions that were running at 70, 80% not that long ago, and now clearance rates are about 50%. So, but clearance rates amongst the more expensive real estate or better quality real estate, the clearance rates there are still quite high. But in the the cheaper, lower end of stuff, then not so much. So anyway, I went to these two auctions, which were half an hour apart and close together, and there wasn't a single everybody there was black or brown. There weren't any black people. Was brown, so they were exclusively Chinese buyers. The only person there who wasn't brown, other than myself, who wasn't brown, was the flunky boy who was along helping the brown auctioneer. So this is the state of things. It went for more than the asking price, both of them, and so it was a fairly successful auction, I guess, and clearly the people there were seriously cashed up. They didn't blink an eye at spending over $4 million. Didn't even blink an eye. And no, I'm not a rich man, so I think $4 million is still a decent bit of coin. But to them, it was chump change, and it showed. So anyway, those properties are still doing very nicely. Now, if you sort of drop down a couple of tiers and say, around entry level into the nice tree-lined street, nice area sort of thing, which really, if that entry level was about 2.5, in between the 2.5 and 3.5 million range, and these people bought a house probably around pretty close to the top and top of the market for that time, and they spent 3.5 mil buying the place, and it's just say a year and a half ago around that time, and it's today it's valued at 3.1, so, or maybe a little bit more, but so it's gone off by 8 to 10% depending on whose numbers you want to look at. So they take a hit if, well, based on the prices today, they take a hit if they were to sell up today. But there's not much of that around. Anyone that bought more than, say, 2.5 years ago, the market could drop back. Oh, it's not a market; it's a rigged international money laundering scheme. The prices could drop back by probably 20%, and they'd still be above water. So they're doing fine. Now the banks started increasing the proportion of deposit that you had to have to buy a house. So most people are having to put 15 to 20% on the table these days. So they may be able to sell out if the prices drop a little bit more, and be on the street, but not still be in debt to the banks, that sort of thing. Which in Australia you're still legally obligated to meet the debt, even if the house sells for 1 penny and you bought it for 100 million, you're still liable for that debt. Although you obviously declare bankruptcy or something like that. But we need to just look, and I've covered this many times, but just looking at prime real estate. This is a waterfront property. Okay, now in 1975, it sold for 40. This is in Sydney. So it's got 180-degree water views, 2.5 bathrooms, 3-car sort of garage carport, 2 stories, panoramic views, nearly half an acre block of land. So it sold for just over $40,000 in 1975. Now the ratio of salaries to that price, it was about say 5 to 5.5 times the average annual wage. Probably 6 times actually. I'll go 6 times the average annual wage if you wanted to buy that place. That was the ratio between the price of the house and average wages back in the day. Now, if you compare today, that house is worth $4.5 million today. It's prime real estate, waterfront, panoramic views, that sort of stuff. So they have put a small plunge pool in there, but other than that, it's the same house as it was in 1975. So that house, in terms of average wages, is instead of 6 times, it's 60 times the average wage to buy that house. 6 times to buy that house in 1975. Today it is 60 times, 60 times the average wage. So that gives you an idea when it comes to prime real estate just how much the pricing has changed relative to wages. Now, if you look at the amount of people from their wages that could afford that sort of house and have a mortgage, sort of like even with a 25% deposit, you're looking at sort of 1 in every 340 wage earners could afford to carry that sort of mortgage, but then they couldn't afford to have children and couldn't afford private school fees and that sort of thing. Once you add in that sort of lifestyle, then you're looking at maybe 1 in 500 could afford that sort of lifestyle. Now, if you look at the amount of houses that sell for that sort of money in Australia or even just in Sydney, there's nowhere near enough people in the country that could afford that. So that's yet another indication that it's offshore money and large institutional money that's driving the prices of the real estate. Now, Western governments have got to get a backbone if they want to make their Western societies, functional again, and they're controlled by the globalists and they don't care. And nearly all the politicians in the Western world now have got rich out of real estate deals. That's how they make most of their money these days. So they're all in on this one. The big institutional financial firms make sure that government, particularly the senior government folks, are able to buy property at absolute knockdown prices. Then they introduce them to super rich, money laundering, cashed up Chinese buyers that pay, way over the card. So these politicians are pocketing, millions illicitly on the side, and so they're not, they've got no problem with the way the real estate situation is going. But if they want to make it manageable for the local citizenry, and they don't appear to, but if they did, then there needs to be a relationship between the purchasing power of the local paycheck and the price of real estate, which is how it used to be. There used to be a very close relationship for that, which is why the guy working in the factory could afford to buy a house and run a car and have children and all this sort of thing. But when it's now 60 times the average wage to buy that house, then there's no way people can afford the same number of children that they used to. They just can't afford it now. So there are just fewer and fewer players in that space of having a family and having children and bringing them up on the basis of hard work and thrift and sensible behaviour will get you ahead, because it won't anymore. In as far as most of the houses, particularly in the nicer areas. The cheaper houses have been almost overrun by black and brown migrants, and they cluster in their ghettos and that sort of thing. So that's the only reason real estate is more affordable in those areas. And that's dragged down the price of real estate on that side. But it's also made the areas less desirable to live in. White people don't want to live, not because of racism, but because no one in the street speaks English, and everyone's wearing the national Indian dress and hanging out together, and if you're a white person in that street, you'll be barely tolerated, let alone welcomed. Now they'll accuse the white people of racism, but they'll never accept their own behaviour as being racist. It's just how we are, but it's the white people who are racist. So this real estate thing, even if you look at the lower end of the real estate, the shabby places you don't want to live, even they're still there. The prices of those places have increased 3 times faster than the rate of wages, which again just indicates the large amount of immigration and the amount of money that the immigrants bring in, or that they're living multiple generations of 30 people to a 2-bedroom apartment and pooling resources and so on, which still means that the local people can't compete with that sort of communal living and pooling of resources. It's completely changing the landscape of not only our society, but of course how we live and how we're going to have to live. We can compete for the diminishing amount of resources. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.